Have you ever been on a flight and found yourself wondering, should I have chosen a different seat? Maybe you picked a window seat and wished you'd gone for an aisle instead, or sat by the window and worried about the lack of easy escape in case of an emergency landing. In reality, there are so many variables when it comes to surviving a plane crash that it's impossible to know for sure which seat would be the safest in such a scenario. But studies done by experts can give us some solid clues. And it turns out that according to science, there really are certain seats that are statistically safer than others. So whether you're traveling halfway around the world or just down the coast, here's how to choose the best seat on the plane for safety. It may be comforting to know that flying is one of the safest ways to travel. But if you ever wonder which seat on an airplane is the safest in case of an accident, you're not alone. There are a lot of factors to consider and even more myths. So let's start with the basics. Modern airplanes are built with strict safety standards and accidents are very rare. But when they do happen, survival depends on many factors, including seat location. A 2007 study looked at 17 major plane crashes over 35 years. It was published in the Journal of Aviation Medicine and analyzed data on the 3,583 passengers and crew members involved in those accidents. The results? Well, unfortunately, they suggest that passengers seated in the front of the plane have less of a chance of survival than those in the back. In fact, passengers seated near the rear of the plane had a 69% chance of survival, compared with a 49% chance for those near the front. Does this mean you should always pick a seat in the back? Not necessarily. The study did not analyze all types of accidents. Instead, it focused on rear-end collisions while the plane was on the ground. Rear-end collisions are relatively rare. However, they do tend to cause serious damage to the front of the aircraft where the engine is often located. Remember that the front of the plane takes the brunt of the impact. When the plane hits something hard like a mountain or building, the front of the fuselage compresses, forcing the cabin to crumple. On the other hand, the rear end of the plane is better protected because it has most of the plane's structure behind it. As the fuselage compresses, the cabin moves toward the back of the plane, allowing the rear passengers more time to evacuate safely. If there's enough time to evacuate before the fuel catches fire, which is what we hope for in any crash situation, what about side collisions? According to statistics, these types of crashes are the most common. Side collisions make up 56% of all fatal crashes, followed by crashes during takeoff or landing, and then rear-end collisions. In a side collision, passengers in the back half of the plane are more likely to survive because they further away from the point of impact. However, in a crash upon landing or takeoff, the back of the plane smashes into the ground first, giving those in the back less time to prepare. In this case, people sitting in the front have a slightly better chance of survival. Remember that these are just statistics based on past crashes and they aren't foolproof. Every situation is different. If you want to see how your seat stacks up, there are websites and blogs devoted to crash test data that can help you crunch the numbers. You'll find tons of articles online that talk about seat specifics, like which seats on the left side of the plane are statistically safer than those on the right side, but don't get too caught up in the details. Crash data is only one part of the equation. You might also want to consider what it's like to evacuate the plane after a crash. Evacuation slides are great, but they aren't deployed in every crash. Whether they're used depends on things like the type of crash, the severity of the damage, and the location of the crash. So if you really want to increase your odds of surviving a plane crash, think about picking a seat close to an exit. This will help you escape quickly in the event of a crash. Seats in the emergency exit row are closest to the doors and offer the fastest way off the plane. However, not everyone can sit in the exit row. You'll need to meet certain requirements like being able to open the door without assistance. Some airlines also reserve the exit row for passengers who need extra help evacuating in case of an emergency. That said, sitting in an aisle seat anywhere on the plane gives you the freedom to move and helps. You avoid having to climb over people in the event of an emergency. For example, if you're stuck in a window seat and the plane's interior is on fire, you'll have to wait for the people between you and the aisle to get out before you can escape. Of course, these people may not realize there's a fire and might be asleep. In the end, deciding whether to sit in an aisle or window seat is totally a personal choice and has more to do with comfort than safety. It's up to you to decide what matters most. And while it's important to know where the nearest exit is in case of a crash, It's also smart to pay attention to the safety card in your seat back. Seat cushions can catch fire, so take off the cover if possible. Use the nearest exit. Fasten your seatbelt and protect your head and neck with your arms. Yes, we know you've heard all this before, but reviewing these tips could help them stick, so it's worth taking a moment to go over them again, especially if you're flying with kids. So what else can you do to stay safe? We asked experts for their top safety tips and got a lot of great ideas, like counting the rows between you and the nearest exit. If you're flying with children, make sure you can easily get them out in the event of a crash. And keep track of where your children are at all times. Don't let them wander off to another seat or the lavatory. And consider the layout of the plane. Is it easier to get to the nearest exit going over or under seat rows? Plan accordingly. Reviewing the safety card in your seat back won't hurt either. Familiarize yourself with the location of exits, emergency equipment, flotation devices, and the safest way to evacuate. Try to avoid wearing clothes made of synthetic materials. They can melt and burn at high temperatures, making it harder to evacuate. And wear comfortable shoes. Sneakers or other slip-on shoes are ideal because they allow you to get out of your seat quickly. Avoid high heels or shoes with laces. That said, leave your sharp objects and other dangerous items in your carry-on bags at your feet. It's much easier to get rid of these items if safety personnel ask you to. Remember to fasten your seatbelt at all times unless you're doing something else, like eating. Keep your tray table up and stowed away. That way you have more room to move and escape if needed. Staying hydrated is also a good idea. Drinking water during a flight can help prevent dehydration, which makes it easier to escape and breathe in the event of a crash. But you'll want to stop drinking about an hour before landing, so you do and have to use the restroom. If you're nervous about flying, try breathing exercises or meditating to calm down. Studies show that fear and anxiety can impair our judgment and slow reaction times, which isn't ideal in an emergency. If a crash does happen, remember that safety officials will do everything they can to rescue survivors. Their goal is to reach everyone within 12 minutes of the crash. So stay calm, act quickly, follow instructions, and protect your head and neck with your hands and arms. Do your best to get out of the plane as fast as possible once the doors are open. That way you'll be ready for whatever comes next. In summary, the safest seats are usually near the back of the plane and close to emergency exits. But no matter where you sit, your best safety tool is being prepared and alert. Thanks for watching. I hope you're now a little bit safer on your next flight. Be sure to check out our videos on how turbulence actually affects pilots and passengers and why planes have black boxes. And don't forget to subscribe so you can learn something new every week.